Over the past couple of months, I've put the 2024 Kawasaki KX450 through its paces. Everything from racing at the Gypsy 500 in Mesquite, Nevada, spinning laps at my local tracks such as Fox Raceway, and everything in between. Today is the day, it's Judgment Day for the 2024 Kawasaki KX450. Now I broke down this review in 5 different segments, starting off with the engine, moving on to the chassis and suspension, and last but not least, tackling the ergonomics and brakes. I felt as if this was the best way to break down Kawasaki's flagship motocross bike, as it is all new for model year 2024. So let's get right to it. Let's address the elephant in the room, the engine performance. A lot of people are saying the 24 Kawasaki KX450 is slow. In my opinion, it is not slow. No 450 motocross bike is slow in my opinion, as the overall output of the bike is over 50 horsepower. And trust me, that is a lot of horsepower. I will say, however, the way this bike builds power is quite sluggish, lethargic, and can make the bike feel heavy exiting tighter corners. Now, I think a simple fix for this is to swap out either the muffler or the full exhaust system itself, drilling holes into the airbox cover, or upgrading to the twin-hour power flow kit, which was just released. I, however, have not opted to purchase any of those mods just yet, just because I want to keep this bike fairly stock. Yes, I can sit here and complain about what I don't like about the engine performance, and quite honestly, I'm okay with putting up with it just because it's not that bad in my opinion. The Achilles heel for the 24 KX450 as far as the power is concerned is exiting the corners. That heavy feeling that I was talking about earlier in this video really gets to me, and quite honestly, causes a lot of rider fatigue. The overall power output of this bike is very, very good. It dynos at about 53 horsepower. I'm gonna thank MXA for giving me that dyno number. And truth be told, I don't want much more power than that. It's a 450. Again, this is not slow. It's a 450 motocross bike. It's very fast. Moving on to the suspension. Now you may have noticed that I have a custom set of Ride JBI forks on this bike. It is a Showa set of forks that I will be doing a review on later on my YouTube channel. Now again, I just want to emphasize that I'm talking about the stock suspension performance about this bike, not those custom set of Ride JBI forks that I currently have on my bike. So the stock set of forks provides a really good bottom out character in my opinion. If you've ridden Cahuilla Creek's new layout recently, the main track that is, you'll notice that the old step up is now a step down and leads you into the flag jump. And if you hit that flag jump, more than likely you've overshot that jump or cased that jump. And if you've overshot it, you know what I'm talking about. There's a subtle little roller, maybe about 30 feet past the optimal landing zone. And quite honestly, if you overshoot that, you more than likely will land right smack dab on the face of that subtle little roller. I did that with the stock forks on, and quite honestly, I was pretty scared, thought my hands were gonna blow off the bars, and lo and behold, it did bottom out, but overall, it was quite comfortable actually. Now I did fail to mention that the forks have been swapped out to my spring rate to match my weight and riding ability, the type of terrain that I'm riding. Moving on to the mid-stroke support. Now there have been times where I've blown straight through the mid-stroke, and now I'm facing towards the bottom end of the stroke of the suspension. The mid-stroke support overall is good. I don't have a lot of hate comms on that. It doesn't really shine in the mid-stroke support in my opinion, but it also doesn't really lack or fail in the mid-stroke support. It just kind of is what it is. As far as the top end of the stroke is concerned, eating up those subtle to small chatter bumps, it does a fairly good job of that. I think it's overall better than my 2022 MC350F in stock form, but I did set it to the Kiefer Inc. suggested setting for the 24 KX450. With that said, we'll move on to the shock. The shock overall provides a really comfortable experience. I don't think it's necessarily lacking in any department. Again, in the mid-stroke support, the bottom end, or even the top, it does a fairly good job. And quite honestly, I'm not finding myself tinkering with things from track to track. I can go ride this thing at Fox Raceway, which is one of my favorite tracks in Southern California, drove all the way to Mesquite and did the 8-hour Gypsy 500 and fun endurance race and did not touch a clicker setting at all. So I do think there's a fairly wide window of what the Kiefer Inc. suggested settings will work in. You will work in soft conditions, hard pack, and intermediate, everything in between. So overall, the suspension performance on the 24 KX450 is quite good. The chassis is really where this bike shines in my opinion. It's super stable, comfortable, and provides a soft feeling over those impacts where you think it'd be quite harsh, those harsh G-outs from landings or jumps, or even just those really gnarly whoops that you'd find at a race like the Gypsy 500. They had a sand section in the back and it was absolutely torn to shreds. But lo and behold, the 24 KX450 chassis ate it up for breakfast. I do not struggle with things such as head shake, the rear stepping out from side to side quite often, The chassis stays fairly composed, and I think the suspension and chassis package on this 24 KX450 provides a quite wonderful, fun, and confidence-inspiring ride. As far as cornering is concerned, I had quite the trouble adjusting to this 24 KX450. Now, I was coming off my MC350F, and if you've ever ridden a 350, it turns more like a 250 rather than a 450. And I have not had a lot of time on a 450 prior to me purchasing this bike. So my biggest struggle at first was on corner entry. I couldn't figure out how to lean this thing over or get it to stay leaned over, and it was quite honestly frustrating. I felt like I just was not myself, whether it was at the turn track, the motocross track, or quite honestly, anywhere where I was riding this thing. And at first I thought to myself, well, I read all the reviews, watched all the videos on this bike, and everyone says it corners even better than the outgoing generation. That is a 23 and older bike. And this 24 doesn't really lack stability, but gain cornering performance, especially on that front end traction side of things. And at first I did not feel that. I was kind of confused, lost, and to be honest, frustrated. But after getting used to this bike, dialing it in more, searching for some settings, like I said earlier, I'm running those key freeing settings, swapping out the springs to match my weight, and getting used to the bike. Overall, I have a blast turning this bike. The ergonomics, this is one area that I really struggled on the 24 KX450. Now I will note that I'm 5'7", I'm on the shorter side of things. I'm not one of these tall guys that are 5 feet 10 plus, 6 foot, you name it. And quite honestly, I felt as if I didn't have a whole lot of room to move on this bike due to the taller seat height. On my MC350F, I did shave down the seat, and I felt like I had a lot of room to move around in the cockpit. Whereas on this bike, I found that the seat was hitting me in the you-know-what over braking bumps. And quite honestly, when I was going off of the takeoff of jumps, I just felt like it was going to hit me in the rear end, and that is the worst case scenario pretty much. Now, I don't know exactly how much I shaved down my seat, but I made it very, very similar to the one that is on my gas currently. Furthermore than that, I rolled the bars back just a little bit more than I would say the average guy. I typically tend to do that on my mountain bikes, my MC350F, the Honda CRF 250 RX that I've had in the past, and it is now translated to this bike as well. I'm running the bar clamps in the back position with the mounts forward, I believe. You guys can correct me on that in the comments down below. I don't necessarily know which way is forward or reverse as far as the bar clamps, but I do have them in the back hole closest to the seat. Moving on to the pegs, I do have them in the high position. I've toyed around with getting some aftermarket pegs, as I feel like the stock ones just aren't necessarily the grippiest compared to some other pegs that I've had in the past, whether that be OEM or even aftermarket. But overall, since I've made those changes, I'm actually really comfortable and happy on this bike. Last but not least, let's tackle the braking performance. One of my favorite parts about the bike is it has a Brembo front braking system. Everything from the caliper to the master cylinder, the reservoir, the line, everything. The Brembo front braking system is honestly, it's a diamond. I love the Brembo brakes. Now again, I don't have a whole lot of time on, or really any time that is, on the 23 or older KX450, so I don't know how the old Nissan unit compares to this new Brembo front braking system from Kawasaki. But quite honestly, I love the Brembo front brakes. I have those on my gas, of course. That was actually prior to them switching to the Brake Tech brakes, which is actually owned by Brembo, but it's not the exact same unit from the master cylinder, the caliper, the components that make up those units. It's not the same as the Brembo. So adapting to this front brake took little to no time. Like again, I love the Brembo. If you couldn't tell already, the Brembo is where it's at. As far as the rear brake is concerned, I had heard that it was actually designed to fit a Brembo rear brake as well, but the Kawasaki test engineers at the last minute chose to go with the Nissan unit. And in my opinion, I'm not the biggest fan of the Nissan brakes after riding the Brembo brakes. Not saying that they are bad. Overall, I just prefer the feel of the Brembo brakes, as in my opinion, they provide a lot more modulation. You mountain bike guys will know that term. It's kind of similar to progressivity, as if when you're pulling the lever in, it's not on or off. It's not pulling in the brake lever all the way just to get a little bit of bite. Now, I cannot say the same for this rear brake. I tend to lock it up quite often, especially more than the Brembo brake that is on my gas. This brake is just quite touchy in my opinion. It goes from not being on the brake to having it locked up quite quick. Now, I could fix that with some adjustment, but honestly, it doesn't bother me that much. I actually think it's maybe in a way a good thing, just because I'm able to learn more rear brake control, which is something that I can work on within my own riding technique. All right, so we made it. We covered all 5 topics of the 2024 Kawasaki KX450. Overall, this bike is really good. I think this bike got a bad rap when it was released to the media, to the public, just because of its slow engine character. Quite honestly, again, this bike is not slow. It just has a sluggish and lethargic engine character, especially from the bottom to mid-range. When you get out of that bottom end, moving towards that mid-range and get to the top end, this bike is an absolute monster. Not saying it's going to out-drag the very powerful and loved 2024 Yamaha YZ450F, or even the Honda, the KTM, you name them. I'm not saying it's necessarily faster than those bikes, but in my opinion, the KX450 is it's quite fast. Now, I'm just going to come out and say it. I don't love this bike or like this bike more than my Gas 350. I've kind of kept the gas under the hood for a little while now, getting that thing nice and rebuilt for you guys and myself, really. So I'm quite honestly just super stoked to hop back on that very, very soon and to show you guys what I've been up to over the past couple of months. Again, I've had this bike now for about 3 months, which seems quite wild. Maybe even 4 months now, I think. I'm going to have to go back and see when I bought this thing. But, man, it's been such a fun time and even frustrating time at first. You know, I'd say the first month or so, I was quite frustrated. And there was times where I was like, did I make the right purchase? Why did I do this? All those weird, confusing, and positive, negative thoughts in my head. And just really want this to be open and candid with you guys. So I went through that for a little while. And then once I figured out the ergonomics package on this thing, dropped in the proper spring rates for my weight and riding ability, quite honestly, I fell in love with this thing. Now, again, I don't love it as much as my 350. I think you'll see me on a 350 more often than not very, very soon, and maybe even a different bike come the end of May. We're hoping to get here at the end of May, so stay tuned for that. Again, I do think this bike serves a useful purpose in the garage. I will be riding this bike. It's not just going to sit there and collect dust. I do plan on keeping it for a little while. So overall, this is my first Kawasaki purchase experience of any motocross bike from them, and I'm quite happy now. I didn't really say that for the beginning, as it took maybe a little bit more time than I expected to adapt to this machine, just because going into buying this bike, I thought this was going to be everything I really ever wanted. Maybe a little bit more power than that 350, a little bit more of that torque character, more stability, which is something I struggle with on my gas, and I did get that, but at the same time, there were some negatives that came with those. All right, I'm going to wrap this one up. I'm running out of sunlight here. It's getting about 6:45 here in Southern California. It's a beautiful sunset. I'm going to go try and catch the last little bit of it and soak up the sun before we head out and ride tomorrow at Fox Raceway with this beast. So again, overall, I just really appreciate the support on the channel, especially as of late. I know maybe it sounds cliche, but I just really appreciate all the support, the comments, everybody just tuning in and really caring about my opinion. I want to be here for a good time and a long time and provide as much insight and especially valuable insight to my viewers. So just really stoked on life right now, stoked on riding, and stoked I get to share this video with you guys. Again, I really appreciate you guys tuning in, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.